Hey everyone, in this screencast I wanted to talk about slide properties in Storyline 2. The slide properties area allow you to do a couple of things. One is set up the behavior of the slide, and you can also turn on or off certain player features at an individual slide level. So we're going to take a look at those things in this screencast. Now you can access slide properties one of two ways. One is via story view. Over in the bottom right hand corner there's slide properties. So when you have a slide selected, you can see the properties for that particular slide being displayed. You can also get to slide properties via slide view. If you come down to where the base layer is and the little cog or wheel symbol will allow you to access slide properties. So it's two ways for accessing exactly the same thing depending on where you are and what method suits you best. Okay, so let's have a look at the slide properties. So I'm going to undock it from the panel just so we can see it a little bit better. And we have a number of options that we can set up for individual slides. The first is how the slide advances. Now the default is that it advances by the user. So when the user clicks on maybe the next button in the player or an object on the slide with the trigger on it that's going to advance it, that's how the slide is going to move from one slide to another. So that's by user. The automatically slide advance is that when this slide gets to the end of the timeline, it will then advance by itself to the next slide. Now something just to be mindful of with the automatically advance is that you need to ensure that the learner, the user, has enough time to read or to take in everything on the slide. So it can be a bit of a juggle in that you don't want it to advance too quickly or force the user to sit there while the whole thing plays through if they may have finished with doing something on the slide. So my preference is to generally use by user, and that way the user is still in control of when they move forward. The next option you have in slide properties is when revisiting the slide, so when you come back to that slide again. And there's three options for when you revisit the slide. One is to resume the saved state. So that's how the slide is when the user leaves the slide. So if they left the slide and the timeline was, say, halfway done and they'd maybe clicked on half of the things or completed half of the interactions and they went forward, if they came back to that slide, it would pick up where they left off, where it's saved at. That includes audio. If the audio was halfway through, when they come back, then the audio just picks up from where it left off. The other option you have is that you can reset the slide back to its initial state, and the initial state of the slide is when the timeline begins. So that'll reset everything on the slide back to how it was at the beginning of the timeline. So if the user has finished the slide, or even if they're halfway through the slide, every time they come back, everything will reset, audio, video, everything back to the beginning of the timeline. The automatically decide is what the default setting is, and that's where Storyline will decide whether to reset or save, resume where it was saved. And the logic kind of works around that. If there's simple objects, maybe some audio, no interactivity, it will automatically just reset it back to the initial state. But if there is some interactive elements on the slide, it will pick up at the saved state. So that's kind of how the logic works. But if you want to be sure of it, you can, at individual slide level, set that to reset to initial or resume at the saved state. Then we have the slide navigation controls. So in general, it'll be previous to next, and they're indicated that they're active via these tick boxes. However, if it's a quiz slide, there'll be a submit button as well. So one of the things I like to do, especially on the first slide, is to turn off the previous button because there's nothing to go backwards to. And then also on the last slide, I like to turn off the next button, because again, there's nothing for them to go forwards to. So it keeps them in the course, and there's no redundant buttons there. Then Underneath the navigation controls, you have the player features. So this is where you can turn off individual or some of the player features at the individual slide level. So generally what will happen in the default setting is that however you have your player set up, each slide will have the same player defaults or those player features showing. However, you can select custom for the selected slides, and when you do that, it will allow you to turn these particular player features on or off for individual slides. So the only thing I've made a change in my player settings was that I turned the seek bar on. I'm assuming that maybe I had some audio on every slide. But what you can do with the custom for selected slides is that if you had a slide that maybe didn't have audio on it, you could turn off that seek bar just on that one slide only. So I might do that on this second slide here. I'll select custom and I'll turn off the seek bar there. Another example might be that, say when you get to the quiz, you might not want to have the resources tab showing. So if I come down to my quiz slide, I can turn off resources. So you can do those things at the individual slide level and customize some of those player features. And we'll have a look at what that looks like. I'll dock my slide properties back in and I'll preview out this scene. And we can see that on the first slide, I have all of my features showing. On the next slide where I turned off the seek bar, it's disappeared. Then I have my third slide, and then I have my quiz slide, and the resources tab has been turned off. So depending how you want for your setup for your course, you can turn those individual things on or off. Something else that you can do, and again this would be via story view, is that if you wanted to apply the same slide property settings across a number of slides, you can actually select multiple slides at the same time by clicking on the first one, holding down the control key, and then selecting the other slides. And in this case, I'll select all of my other slides. And then what I could do was, in this case, if say I didn't want to have the previous button on any slide, I could click and turn the previous button off, and that will turn it off all of the slides in my course. If we look at the first one, it was already off. It's off on the second, it's off on the third, and it's also off on the last slide as well. Well, that's it for this screencast, slide properties, another way of adding some customization to your modules and the way that the individual slides behave and the player features that are displayed.